What's new, Battletech fans? As many of you know, I recently hit the road for AdeptiCon with the Inner Sphere Paint Bay, making our way out to Milwaukee, Wisconsin to attend for the first time. We'll have some coverage of that event up soon, but first, we're all familiar with the time-honored tradition of taking home some swag, and when I was offered the chance to upgrade the pit with an exclusive AdeptiCon painting set from Games and Gears, I couldn't say no. Now, I've heard mixed reviews about these products from other creators, so I wasn't quite sure what to expect when I got them home. I do think it's weird that I can't find any real social media presence for these people, and their website doesn't seem to work beyond a cursory level. Their Facebook and Instagram seems to drop off the face of the earth around October of 2022, which is admittedly kinda sus, and I also don't really see a lot of video reviews for these things that aren't at least 5 to 10 years old. So, you know what I had to do. Naturally, it was time to engage the old investigation mode, and I decided to review the set, giving it an in-depth look, using each brush for various things, and see how I liked the set overall. Remember, your mileage may vary on this stuff, but I've heard some creators refer to Games and Gears as modern-day snake oil salesmen in some videos, explaining that they do a good job of selling you their product on site, but the quality is lacking when you get them home. Remember that everything I say here is my own personal experience with the brushes and the other materials that I have here in front of me, and I can't guarantee from set to set what the quality is going to be like. That said, caveat emptor as always, and I've also seen it said that I may have gotten a decent set through pure, unadulterated luck. Who knows? The only way out is through, as they say. So far, I haven't had the issues I was told I might experience, and I painted a lot of stuff with these in one sitting to really test them out. The same creator calling them snake oil salesmen also said the brushes would fall apart within short order, so I wanted to check my set for that by getting some decent work done from the word go. One thing I liked right off the bat is the design aesthetic. Each brush is a self-contained unit. No more losing the little plastic caps that protect the ends of your brushes. Not only does the handle itself serve this purpose, but the design also allows me to use each brush in a more controlled manner if I use just the tip. See what I did there? Apparently, a flaw with this design is that the brush doesn't stay in the housing when put away for storage. In other words, the brush tip won't stay stored in the handle when given the old Dairy Queen test and turned upside down, but this isn't an issue I've encountered so far. None of my brushes have this issue, by the way. I like the idea of having a finer control over the brush tip, and I can use it like a little golf pencil as opposed to wrangling a full brush handle in a situation where my light has to be close to the Mini for me to see what I'm doing. At that detail level, sometimes you're in there close, so being able to deconstruct the brushes at will is a great feature. The collapsible rinsing cup had grooves built into the bottom, so not only do I have a more compact replacement for the frankly gaudy Citadel water cup I used to use, with its supposed design features I'll never take advantage of, but the different raised areas provide a gentler, less abrasive way to rinse your brushes off in between coats. Less wear and tear is always nice. As for the actual painting, each brush is suited for different kinds of painting, so it may take a while for a novice painter to find their preferred brushes for each task, but I was able to settle on what I liked pretty quick, and I imagine you will too. The mat itself gave me lots of space, with specially cordoned areas of the mat to organize things like bits, paints I may need rapid access to, or other little things I would want to have handy during the painting process. The areas up top will keep things like brushes or minis you'll be using for a project in order, and the gear-shaped areas to each side can hold all manner of useful minutia. Where the mat itself is concerned, it's nice to ditch the GW look and embrace something a little bit more, well, my style. It's a little thicker than the GW mat I was using previously, but it's also less textured on the surface, and this keeps the paint from rubbing off the edges of your Mini as you use the table for leverage or steadiness during the process. The yellow detail brushes were a joy to use, and I found the largest of them reminded me the most of the regiment brush from the army painter. Others remind me of various other makers I've used over the years, so the set feels very comparable to other offerings on the market insofar as efficacy and user-friendliness. I used the green brushes for base coating, or areas where I needed a little stiffer of a brush to get into those small areas without losing control. All the brushes have, so far, retained their shape and don't seem to indicate any fraying or that they're going to do so in the near future. The flat brushes were good for targeted dry brushing, but I'd like to see some larger, maybe even angled brushes from them to rival those of the army painter. But the sizes of these definitely lend themselves to things like gun barrels, missile pods, and vents. The things I like to metallicize the most, and those are often the areas I'll have to hit with a lighter silver dry brushing in order to make those areas pop back after a Nuln Oil wash, so the sizes of these brushes are perfect for that purpose, and I'll know I'll have a need for that in the future, so these will fit the role nicely. I can also see these working well for painting things like racing stripes, etc., with their shape and how the brushes retain it even after rinsing. I could be mistaken, but I have a feeling all of these brushes might be synthetic. However, the bristles look like sable to me, so that's what I'm going to operate under the assumption of until I know differently for sure. I know some folks are sticklers for sable brushes only and don't want synth brushes, but some of them feel like they have a little bit of that best of both worlds quality, and I'm definitely a sable over synth guy, so I know I'm not alone in that assertion. The cutting board was the icing on the cake for me with this set, with the same motif as the painting mat and a good 3-layer thickness to the board itself. This was useful for decal cutting, and I look forward to trying it for other aspects sometime in the near future. For a set that ran $150 on site, I feel like this was a good upgrade to the materials I was using in the pit here at the studio, replacing items I can now give to other talented artists close to me. However, I will admit that their website being wonky kinda makes me hesitant to recommend them without caution, as well as their lackluster and decaying social media presence. On top of the existence of more than a few negative reviews where claims of lifetime warranties are concerned, design flaws mentioned before, etc., I would recommend that you evaluate these on site before buying if you get the chance. The dissenters are correct when it comes to the enthusiasm of the sales team. When you buy a good amount of stuff at their booth, they definitely make a really big show out of the whole thing, as Ed Sullivan might say. And I respect the enthusiasm when I see things like this, but I definitely feel the hooting and hollering, bell ringing, etc. is more of an outside festival sort of thing, such as at a Ren fair, for example. Otherwise, it does kinda seem a bit on the red flaggy side to me, but maybe that's just because I'm a cynical American and they're a British company. The Brits always did seem to have a different sort of flair. The other frustration I had was trying to find where these items may be on sale outside of a convention experience or an official website, since I know not everyone can make a cross-country drive to go to conventions where some of this stuff is often exclusively sold. To my dismay, sites like Noble Knight Games and Alpha Omega report a great deal of their products to be out of stock where this brand is concerned, and this further lends credence to the idea that perhaps something isn't right in the state of Denmark, or wherever it is that they're from. Again, this is just my opinion. I don't have all the facts. What I can say for certain is that where it comes to the materials that I have sitting right here in front of me, I enjoy them. Whether or not the brushes in this set deteriorate as I've been warned they may, at the very least, the mat still functions as intended, the cutting board functions as it should, and the water cup is admittedly more convenient than my previous solution there. However, those items alone aren't worth the purchase price when you see them at a convention, and I'm definitely not going to throw out my collection of brushes from other makers in favor of exclusively using what I got in this set. Though, I can at least say I've had a good experience versus what some others seem to report, but whether that's by design or just dumb luck, I guess I'll never know. A follow-up video would be in order if I experience any of the flaws I've seen others complain about in the future, but for now, I'm gonna sit back, be grateful, and enjoy the process of painting against the backdrop of memories made and friendships forged at my first AdeptiCon. If you were at the show this year, tell me in the comments, and especially if you got one of these sets. I'd love to hear from you and find out what your experiences are. But until next time, I've got a lot of work to do, so subscribe to see more as we make our way toward 40 episodes here in the pit. Turn on all the notifications so you can find out exactly where Battlebound's gonna turn up next, and don't forget to hit that Patreon to keep more Battletech content tumbling out of your screen and into your brain space where it belongs. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Tuckdavian, and I'm sure looking forward to seeing you next time right here out on the Space Lanes.
So the layer brushes and the lining brushes hold on to paint really well, and they distribute it well, and they clean well, which is nice. They hold a really good point for detail work, and they can cover a pretty good area if that's what you're going for. I will say though, out of all of the 3 sets, the flat brushes really shine, especially when you're doing mech work, considering all of the flat planes and geometric shapes. Really good stuff. I like them a lot. Regarding the criticisms about these brushes falling apart, I didn't notice any lack of integrity in the quality of design. There was no fiber shedding into the paint, nothing that I normally run into with cheaper brushes using thicker paints like what you would use on a miniature. Any kind of thick acrylic, it didn't shed into it at all. The one issue I did run into was one of the layer brushes wanted to separate while I was using it into its respective parts. It was just one of the brushes, and it might just be because I'm left-handed and hold things weird. I just ended up using just the tip, like Tuck said, and it worked out pretty good for me, so I don't see a major issue there at all.